Welcome to Box Scores with Wayne. I'm your host, Dwayne Hewitt, and you might know me by something else, but call me Wayne. Uh, Named it this just because people talk about box scores, and sometimes box scores teach you things. It doesn't. There's a whole battle right now going on between football players and PFF, which I personally love as a former college athlete, former college football player. Like I understand some of the things that PFF does, but there's a lot of things I don't take, and some people take their word as bond. And not everyone's word is bond. PFF has its good things, as well as has its bad things. But let's get into it, man. I'm here to talk about Mike Tomlin. Got my Steeler gear on. I am a Steeler fan, and this weird obsession with people wanting him gone and saying certain things about him that are just flat out untrue, and just to fit their narrative. And they're literally people have been pushing for Mike Tomlin's job this entire season. ESPN, Stiller fans. There's a lot of things that go on, and I just want to get to the nitty gritty of it. I want to attack a lot of the points I've been hearing, and just discussing things that needs to be said because someone has to say these things, right? Someone has to say these things. So the first thing I want to talk about is a video from ESPN on, I believe it was Tuesday, after the Steelers lost to the Bills, after Mike Tomlin went 10-7 with a roster where his quarterbacks were Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph. And I name all three quarterbacks because all three quarterbacks got playing time. Now, this Tomlin has faults and reasons where he messed up and mistakes that he has made along his time as a Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. 100%. Never going to argue that he hasn't made mistakes. He has made some mistakes, some big mistakes. Also, he's been unfortunate by circumstance. But the most important thing that people lack when they talk and make their talking points is they don't want to use context when it doesn't benefit their point. Context is only ever used when it benefits their point. And one thing we're going to do here on Box Score Watching with Wayne is we are going to use context, whether it's good or bad, in these situations. Because context is what's needed. You gotta use context clues in life to figure out some things. So why not use context? And every circumstance has context to it. So we're gonna bring out some context. But the first thing I want to talk about Shannon Sharp. I think he said something very irresponsible and in on first take on Tuesday morning. So let's get to that and we'll talk about this. So this is Shannon Sharp right here.
Fact, got great cliches, great sayings, but sometimes it's starting to fall on deaf ears. And so I asked the Pittsburgh Steelers, at what point in time does not losing justify someone still being in place? It should be about.
So, question for you guys. As someone who's a former athlete, I've been part of locker rooms where whatever coach has said, and it's starting to fall on deaf ears. Transparency. I've been on a team my first 2 years in college. We ain't win a game. And every week, in the beginning of the season, you can see where the message and the motivation was there. But you can see the lack in preparation, lack in attitude, and how messages fall on deaf ears. Your message doesn't fall onto deaf ears in the middle of the season when you end the season on a high note. The Steelers were incredible to end the season. Now you may say, oh, they didn't play many good teams. It doesn't matter. When messages fall on deaf ears, you look bad versus bad teams and you lose to bad teams. Example, the Philadelphia Eagles. Whatever messaging they had, once they started to lose, you could saw the body language, you could see it into the team, right? That is something that I totally disagree with Shannon Sharp on. The message doesn't fall on deaf ears. Messages fall on deaf ears. You see that in the results. None of these people had Mike Tomlin and the Steelers to win this game outside of Steeler fans who, let's be right, fans of teams are delusional and think our team should win every single game, right? That's what's happening. Now, when you do that, when messages fall on deaf ears, your team doesn't win, your team doesn't respond, your team doesn't win close games. That's the thing that's blowing me out. They have lost one game, I believe, when it's under a touchdown, and they have the best record in the past one of the best records in the past couple of years in tight scoring games. Messages don't fall onto deaf ears. Then in the first half and second half, your team is completely different. That doesn't, right? But we're gonna start with the mistakes Mike Tomlin has made throughout his tenure, and I would say the last 7 years, because that's a big thing. Steelers fans like to harp on is that we haven't won any games in the last 10 years in the playoffs, and 7 years in the last playoffs, right? I'm going to talk about the mistakes, and then I'm going to get to the context of all these situations, right? So the mistake Mike Tomlin made, he definitely kept Matt Canada too long. And if he would have kept Matt Canada throughout this year and the entire year, his team would have gotten in the playoffs, and there have been issues that would have been made. That is 100% correct, and that's 100% on Tomlin. Because at the end of the day, he should have known last year, based on the previous 2 years, this guy wasn't the guy for the job. We know Mike Tomlin's a loyal guy, but sometimes loyalty is overrated. In certain situations, loyalty is overrated in some situations where it's going to cost you your job and cost you the locker room. And at some point this year, the locker room was compromised because of what Matt Canada was doing. And you saw the new energy that the team provided once Matt Canada was gone and how that looked. The second mistake Mike Tomlin made this year was starting Mitchell Trubisky for 2 games. He should have known that Mitchell Trubisky sucks. I thought Mitchell Trubisky could do some things, but I was wrong too. I evaluated that talent incorrectly, right? I thought whatever was going on in Chicago ruined him, and that was the case. Wasn't the case. Mitchell Trubisky just isn't that guy, right? But he eventually turned to Mason Rudolph, and now the team has made some changes. Penalties. When a team gets a lot of penalties, which Steelers at certain points they would get some, especially in the beginning of the year, their penalties were higher. That is something that you can put on the coach. The biggest mistake I think Tomlin has made throughout his entire career is he's well known for saying, I am not going to treat all my players the same. AKA, the best players will have preferential treatment. And that's noted definitely in a lot of football locker rooms. Bill Belichick is one of the few. Don't let people tell you it's like that everywhere you go. Bill Belichick is one of the only and very seldom coaches that don't treat his top players differently than they do other players. Every single coaching program, or majority of coaching programs, they're like this, especially when someone's a player coach. When guys are player coaches, that's the vibe that happens. That's why players want to play with them. You don't want to, but the crazy thing, like, that's what happened, and that's what being a player coach. All the players still want to play for Mike Tomlin. I'm not going to get into the good things about Mike Tomlin, right? Yes, he hasn't won a playoff game since then. But I just want people to tell me, outside of the Browns, what team. Well, I'll give you Jaguars, but that Jaguar team was pretty good, right? I'll give you the Jaguars, but that Jaguar team was pretty good. But outside of the Browns, and let's say the Jaguars, those first 2 years, no one thought they were going to beat the Chiefs, and no one thought they were going to beat the Bills. No one thought that. What else other things has Mike Tomlin done bad? I think, to me, the biggest indictment for me personally on Mike Tomlin is he's been a coach for 17 years, which is now the longest tenure out of any coaching tree. And he doesn't have a coaching tree. He doesn't have people you can ruck around in the NFL and say, he came up under the Tomlin system. He came up under the Tomlin system. He came up under the Tomlin system. To me, that's a big indictment of that, right? But also, people don't want to believe this. I also relatively think Tomlin hasn't had the courtesy of picking his coordinators as much as we want to believe he has. One thing about the Steeler brass is they do what they want to do. I think the same thing when it comes to draft picks. I think there's a suggestion who Tomlin suggests who he wants, and that is what's going on. I suggest that we get this player, but overall, Kevin Colbert made the final decision. Omar Khan makes the final decision. If you don't believe me in those situations, I'll give you an example that's something that's been highly been reported on. Kyle Shanahan did not want Trey Lance. The owner of the 49ers and John Lynch wanted Trey Lance. This something has been widely reported. So, don't think every happens. It doesn't matter who Matt McCarthy wants. I guarantee you. Mike McCarthy. Doesn't matter what Mike McCarthy wants in a Cowboy Nation. They're going to get whoever Jerry and Stephen Jones want to get and put on this team. Those guys make the final decision. Belichick is one of the few seldom coaches that happen. I'll give you another example. Mike Vrabel, who's now fired, did not want to get rid of A.J. Brown. That was a GM decision. The GM got rid of A.J. Brown. You can see it in videos. It's been reported that he did not want this guy out. So, that's the biggest thing. But let's go ahead and add context to these, right? The year that the Steelers lost to the Jaguars, right? That year that we lost to them into the playoffs. The Steelers had one of the best offenses in the league, but their defense wasn't the best. And everything for that season and for the trajectory of the Steelers for the next few years changed simply because, and we got to be honest here, because the reason why all of that changed is because Ryan Shazier got hurt. His football career ended. The Steelers have always been a team where the defense has, you can't win if your defense doesn't have playmakers. And that Steelers team defense playmaker was Ryan Shazier, right? Without Ryan Shazier, that defense turned to shit. It was bad. We go to the Browns year. That is a year where you could blame Tomlin, right? You could blame Tomlin. You want team came into that game unprepared after the week before where they played amazingly, right? That's good. Tomlin's biggest indictment to me is not having a Super Bowl appearance with the Killer Bees. But you also got to take a look at the context of that team. That team had Mike Mitchell starting at safety. Artie Burns was a starting corner on that team. Bad drafting decisions were made in the years prior, in my opinion, especially on the defensive side of the ball. In the secondary, that team did not prepare for the leavings of Ike Taylors, the Ryan Clarks, and the Ike Taylor, Ryan Clarks, and Troy Polamalu's of the world, right? They weren't ready for that, right? I find it very, very weird when people say things like, I want to shout out somebody because I do rock with him, and it's gonna look like I'm picking on him, but I actually do rock heavily with the Pick Aside podcast. Rock heavily with Joel Moran. Like I think he does have some good takes for the most part, right? So, how many times are we going to keep telling ourselves that Mike Tomlin is a great head coach just because he manages to finish with a 500 record and get smoked in the playoffs? That is what Joel said, right? Now we're going to go here. Mike Tomlin in 17 years has only finished 500 3 times. So that is wrong right there, right? And the years that he did finish with that 500, never given playoffs. All the other years, that is incorrect. Incorrect. One thing I could blame Tomlin on is we do have games every year where we lose to bad teams. And that's something that can't happen as a head coach, especially as great of a head coach as he is, as Mike Tomlin is. That's something that cannot happen in a league on a year-to-year basis, right? So fans who say that, right? But you got to think, out of 32 teams, only one team wins the Super Bowl every year. Mike Tomlin has an 8-10 record in the Super Bowl. And all of these great coaches that they call similar, especially the John Harbaughs of the world, has a similar record. The only difference is Mike Tomlin doesn't have a 2-time MVP. In what the same time span that we're talking about, and let me get back to my solo shot. In the same time span that we're talking about with Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh has one more playoff win than Mike Tomlin. And John Harbaugh is going to have a back-to-back, not back-to-back, but a 2-time MVP who was already a unanimous MVP before. You see what you dig what I'm saying? Better rosters than Tomlin has had, but in that same time span, he's 1-7 versus Mike Tomlin in the last 8 matchups, right? We're unequivocally a better roster. Big Ben hampered this team because he didn't want them to draft his successor. And unfortunately, the way that Steelers work out and the Rooneys and the Colberts of the world, whatever Ben wanted, he got. It wasn't like with Aaron Rodgers where they said, we don't care, we're going to draft Jordan Love. Brett Favre, we don't care, we're going to draft Aaron Rodgers because they have a proper succession plan. Place, ready to go. Steelers are a loyal franchise, hence why we never fired anybody. And we really don't like getting rid of talent unless you're really disgruntled and want to leave. We don't deal with that BS. I want to bring a touch upon something that Sarah's like, if Vrabel can get fired, if Belichick can get fired, why can't Tomlin get fired or let go? Right? If Andy Reid in Philadelphia could have got let go after many, many things. People don't realize this, but those teams that and those guys, their teams were declining. And if you don't believe me, the proof is here itself. I can pull up the proof for you. So Mike Vrabel, after only using not a franchise quarterback, not in my opinion a top 10, top 15 quarterback of all time in Ben Roethlisberger, he lost a receiver who wasn't even a top 5 receiver at the time of him leaving. He has yet since turned into that, but at the time of his leaving, his departure, A.J. Brown was not where he was at. Since losing A.J. Brown, he's finished below 500 every single season. It's only been 2 seasons, but he's finished below 500. And the team has regressed, down in losses. The Pittsburgh Steelers have actually gotten better on a year-by-year basis since in the last 3 years. 9-7-1, 9-8, 10-7. Like this team has we got better from last year to this year. It's a game better, but we got better. And last year we didn't make the playoffs. This year we did make the playoffs. Right? Andy Reid, when going to leave Philadelphia in his last years, his team was 11-5, decreased to 10-6, then they went 8-8 and 4-12. That is the definition, Shannon Sharp, of falling on deaf ears, because your team performance is reflecting that your message is falling on deaf ears. Bill Belichick, after losing Tom Brady, he went to the playoffs the 1 year, right? Then they went 7-9. Then they went 10-7. Oh, look, they have a chance. Lost in the first round. 8-9, 4-13. And more egregious than keeping Matt Canada is making Joe Judge and Matt Patricia your offensive coordinators right after 2 years ago your quarterback was a Pro Bowler. Whether you say he was a reserve or not, Mac Jones was having a great year. Right? We have to use context in these conversations when we're talking. Otherwise, we're going to be very, very flagrant, very, very ill-advised, and we're telling people lies, right? Looking at my notes, there's some other points I wanted to touch on before I end this video, right? I understand. I'm going to touch upon the Matt Canada things. Matt Canada should not have been in this position this year. And what I'm looking forward from Tomlin moving forward is he's at a press conference right now. I watched a little bit of it. He already announced that he's going to be looking into outside sources. Now, the next move, which I'll touch upon other videos, is Steelers should keep Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, or go out and get somebody else and let Kenny Pickett battle it out with him, right? We have to discuss these things, right? Even and I just want to double check this before I flagrantly say something incorrect, because correct me if I wasn't wrong. Even Tony Dungy, when he was with the Buccaneers, that team decreased. They had to get somebody else in there that can have a better message. Messages falling on deaf ears only occurs when your team is decreasing. So now if the Steelers come back less than they are last year, then I can definitely see, okay, that makes sense, right? Bill Cowher, when we retired, we were 8-8 after being Super Bowl champions. And the previous year before us being Super Bowl champions, we were 15-1, right? Tomlin has definitely made some mistakes. But the fact to act like Tomlin's not a great coach is utterly, utterly ridiculous. It's asinine, and it's one of the craziest things I've heard Steelers fans and other fans at NFL say. Tomlin is currently a top 5 coach in the NFL, whether you want to believe it or not. Because no other coach could do the things that he has done with this team, right? A lot of coaches, the Browns sucked for years, right? Comes to fancy comes, they get better roster. The Steelers roster is talented, but a lot of people aren't good if their quarterback situation isn't good. Example, right there. You still have one of the best running backs in Tennessee with Vrabel. Have still a good defense. You've got DeAndre Hopkins this year, and your team did not improve. The Atlanta Falcons are one of the most talented teams in the league. They didn't have a good quarterback, and they folded. Situations like this is what happens. If you're able to overcome these situations, people shouldn't disrespect your name and disrespect my talent, which I feel like a lot of things are going on, right? Um, I'm gonna do more videos moving forward. So I appreciate everybody that is gonna check in, listen to this, talk to this. But Mike Tomlin and this weird obsession that Steelers fans have, this obsession that Steelers fans have with wanting to see Mike Tomlin gone is really, really crazy to me. That you would want to see a coach that doesn't lose. Would you guys rather? I know we're in a spot where it's either he's too like the issue is he's too good to coach. Mike Tomlin is like Eric Spoelstra, right? And I love saying this. They will overachieve with teams that they shouldn't be overachieving with. And then if you give them a good roster, they're going to give you a chance. You're going to have your blunders like the Heat 2011 finals. You know, some playoff losses, right? The Heat after going to the playoffs getting swept the next year. And that's going to happen bumps and roads with these type of coaches, right? But you give them the talent, give them time as they're nurturing these guys. People don't understand, like, a lot of people wait to see, like, this is the thing with, like, young teams where it's like, oh, we got a young team. This, you know, we're getting better, we're getting better, we're getting better. We still have a relatively young team. Especially when you look at our stars wise. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, right? Minka, he's not that old. TJ Watt's not that old. Cam Hayward is old. He's going to be gone, right? We have young talent. Just got to find a quarterback and grooming him. Now, these players being in these close games and getting there, just not having the talent to get over the hump. When the talent is there for them to get over the hump, they've been in these situations so much time, the repetition is right there. And now they're going to feel better and they're not going to be as tense. Like George Pickens getting his first playoff games, he had some fumbles, he did some things wrong, right? But to say you want to get over a coach that gives you a possibility of getting into the playoffs every year, I would much rather have that. I'd rather have my team be able to compete on a week-to-week basis, which the Steelers do every week, right? They may have a couple games where they blunder stuff, but the way us Steelers fans act is the reason why we're so on an emotional roller coaster every week. It's because we're in every single game. There are teams. Imagine being a Panthers fan when your team was out of the game every game. We're in every game, possibility to win the playoffs. And even though we were down 21-0, there was a point in the game was a 7-point game, and we had a chance to do something. Now we just got to start capitalizing. So the same Mike Tomlin should be gone this year and wanting him out when you have coaches like Vrabel, Andy Reid previously, and Bill Belichick, and Tony Dungy previously, who their teams regress, which is the reason why they got fired or let go or were told to move on while our team is actually getting better makes no sense to me, man. This is Box Score Watching with Wayne. Till next time, I'll talk to all you guys later. Every Thursday, you could catch us. We're going to be mainly talking sports, football, basketball. So until next time, my name is Wayne. I'll holla.